What's up? I'm Rick, and this is your seat at the table. And believe it or not, this is try number 4 to get this intro going on this particular clip. You know what? I went out the other day and I got me this doohickey. You can't see, it's just off the side of the camera. That is a USB port extender. And what it's allowed me to do is, you know, actually get my headphones in play along with the camera, and I don't know if that will improve the quality of the sound and control it a little bit more. I don't know. We're going to find out. A couple topics that come up in the last few weeks that I've been watching other folks' videos, and I'll put a couple of the links to their video stuff on the bottom because I'm that kind of guy. I'm that kind of guy. I'm not going to sit there and lambaste and tear down and troll their content. I'm just not going to do that. But they still have some good content, and it's worthy of your time and effort if that's your thing. In particular, this one that come up, and then I started doing some research. The difference in the gaming industry, the tabletop role-playing games, role-play in games, is the difference between skill-based and level-based systems. And ironically, when you Google either one of those tags, you don't get a whole lot. I mean, I was surprised. I expected there to be entire tristies on and loads and video topics on these subjects. There are some out there, don't get me wrong, but not nearly the amount that I expected to be. And I think that for a lot of gamers, old and new, that we don't always see that or understand the significant differences between the systems and the styles that exist, right? I mean, we have gobs and gobs of game systems to pick from today. Those of us that have been around a long time, you go back 40 years, there was still a respectable amount of variety, but there were much fewer of them. So when we talk about skill versus leveling systems, the most common leveling system gamed out there is, of course, the Dungeons and Dragons. And the concept there is that your characters develop far more rapidly using a leveling system than you do on a skill-based system. And for a lot of players, this is something that they want. They want their characters to grow. Sometimes between sessions, every session, the next session we're more powerful. We can take more damage. We can deliver more damage. We can do more thingamabobs. We get more extra feats. We get extra magic. It goes on and on and on. And in part, that all game systems generally have a reward system for the characters, whether it is called experience or points or dice or buy-in or whatever you want. And I'm sure that there's a whole bunch of them that I'm tripping over at the moment. But the idea being is that your characters evolve over time in the game. As they do things, they become better at doing the things they do, and perhaps they pick up other abilities to do other things. And so most game systems have ways to include what we call attributes, although the terms can vary from game system to game system, of course. Your stats, whether, strength, endurance, constitution, dexterity, agility, charisma, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All those also have plus and minuses. On many games, if your character ages up to a certain point, some of those stats might start to decrease. In some games, you can have magic, you can have technology that enhances those stats. But at the end of the day, the stats are not what drives the system. You either have a skill-based system or you have the leveling-based system. And this is not to say that the leveling systems don't have skill sets, because that's not true. We do know, like Dungeons and Dragons has a whole chapter on skills and skill sets. And as a matter of fact, the older the system you get, the more broader the skill set options for you are. The newer editions, they've consolidated many skills, which I personally have always felt was a mistake, because there's a distinct difference between doing certain types of agility-based things that should be unrelated to just a blanket role. But then their idea is, once again, is to ratchet up, speed up, move the game forward faster. This is all based on that ROLL play system, as opposed to taking the role of your character. You are generating the mechanics and pushing the mechanics of the character to develop and deal with whatever situation your character finds itself facing. So there's a large, wide, or broad philosophy on the differences between style of play. Play is play. And you can argue with me all you want, but the truth of the matter is you came to have fun, to enjoy, perhaps get away from real world issues and problems, submerge yourself in something that you yourself would never be able to participate in, or couldn't do, or were too scared to do. I mean, I'm just being realistic and honest. So when we talk about, basis skill systems, so when I started doing my looking up things and trying to do my due diligence, and ironically, I actually try to do due diligence. I do make efforts to take notes when I can, and sometimes I'm getting older and my memory has little bits of quirks and issues occasionally, so that's what it is. But there's so many game systems out there that actually are driven by skills and not leveling. Most game systems include something similar to a class, or if a class also refers to classification. There's a lot of people who misconstrue what class means, like it's a social class, but in reality, it's an acronym for classification. At least it was back in the day. So if you're classified as a fighter, most of your skills and your experience are going to evolve around fighting and fighting related things. And so if you're a technician who's an electronic specialist, the odds are pretty good that you're not going to be a fighter, and your fighting skills are going to take second or third fiddle to your computer skills or your technical knowledge skills or your repair skills. And we're based on the game system that you're choosing to use, and how it's going to be defined and designed. So, I mean, there's just so many varieties of game systems that have skill set base that as you progress, so as a successful campaign concludes or a successful event takes place at a session, you perhaps the games master, the narrator, the storyteller, whatever your bag of tea is today, is going to sit there and pass on the basics of saying, okay, you picked up an extra couple points, or you picked up an extra 12,000 experience points, whatever, based on the system. And that allows your character to develop. The question is, in leveling based systems, it's just plug and play. You're going to take whatever your experience is and plug it into your count. And if your experience points reach a certain level, and then you're allowed to level up. That is a very basic concept in the RPGs today, and people tend to play it down or to gloss over it. They don't really make the connection to it. Whereas if you look at the skill set game systems, they're supposed to imply that you've learned enough about a skill to perhaps become a little better or a little familiar with it than you were before. But many systems actually require your character to take some knowledge classes, either classes, tutorials, hands-on, get some advice and some instruction from somebody who already is in that field and is better at that skill than your character. And this usually is supposed to take time. Now, many game systems, many game masters, many players take it for granted that they can do this during downtime. So we're not, wasting valuable game time, because our tabletop interaction, whether it's virtual or play by post or at the actual physical table, is extremely valuable time, and we don't want to spend it. We don't want to waste that much of it if we can, if any of it, if we can help it. And this helps more so the older we get. We're more attuned to less frivolous things. But this also bases on your group and your players, your people. What kind of entertainment level are they expecting, and how serious they are about what we are doing? And that can vary. You can get some serious players that come to a very levity-based, non-serious group and become very disfranchised or disgusted with it and not return, and vice versa, because you can get somebody who's expecting to have some lighthearted bandering and a little bit of chicanery going on at the table between the actual people, and find a very serious group of role players, ROLE, and become totally disenfranchised, disgusted, and or despairs at being able to fit in and chooses not to come back. And that happens. And there's many game masters that understand this. And then there's some who also understand this is the levels of seriousness I want from at my table, and they intentionally harvest players for that role. So if you don't fit the particular bill of a particular person, then you're not going to be at their table, kind of thing. So when we're back to the skill set, one of the downsides skill set systems, skill-based game systems, in my opinion, please remember that this is all just my personal opinion, because I can't say 100% what is and what isn't. And I should have had this thing put on here earlier, and I'll be damned if I'm going to restart this stupid channel. Let's see if I can find it. Really? Sometimes I'm just trying to get used to my system, and I've been using this system for a while, and it never quite works the way I want it to, when I want it to. Yeah, here we go. Is that it? Yeah, there we go. Right? I can have that in-person, in-camera video thing too. I mean, I'm not a fan of that sort of thing, but I know some players are, or some podmasters are, and more than I like to say. I mean, no offense, really want to see me. Hey, I got my teeth in today. That has a tendency to change my voice a little bit sometimes. And as you can see, I'm actually wearing my headset. I was able to get this doohickey thing over here, this USB port extender that has 4 extra ports on it. My computer only had 2, and I've said that before. So I had one for my wireless mouse, and I don't ever how I ever got through a day without a wireless mouse. The wires were always such a pain in the backside, and that takes one of those ports. And of course, the other port is for the camera feed. You can see this little gizmo sitting up here that the jury rigged, and I've done a video on that back in the day. So once again, I'm not a big fan of this sort of thing, because you're not here to see me. You're here to listen to my ramble. Yes, you're here to see if I got anything of interest, and so on and so forth. But so we're back to the skill sets. One of those things about the skill set based games, they tend to take longer, and the development of characters can take longer, and they seem slower paced. And then there are entire game systems, that actually your character's almost completely developed at the point you sit down at the table, and except for minor advancements, you really don't need to level up or to pile in experience. Your character has what the character has, and growth from there on out is more on a personal level, and on perhaps gear and equipment level, and or on a physical level. Something happens to your character and they have to take some serious damage. That's a whole nother stuff for another damn video. Traveler is one of those game systems that actually go back, and I don't own Traveler. I don't have anybody to play the game with, so I'm not inclined to go out and buy the latest version. It's just, I guess, Mongoose produces Traveler, and I understand it's a very good game. I've been watching Seth Gorkowski's videos and Shooner's videos, and RPGs at 28 millimeter. I'm sorry. Once again, I'll have to put those guys' links down below if I remember to do it. They got some good stuff, and I don't always necessarily agree with what everybody says, but that's also human. That is also what we are. So Space Opera came out in 1980. Traveler initiated in 1977, so I would have been 11 years old when it came out, and my best friend brother had started buying Traveler, and then we would borrow it like we did this D&D game, and would sneak a game here and there, and then as soon as the opportunity came up, we bought into, my friend Richie bought the Traveler system, and I bought Gamerworld. And you talk about a very rules light system. This system here, the initial TSR application, 1978, I believe. I don't have my glasses on here. Yeah, this is the 1978 edition, and this might be the 81 edition, I don't remember, but I know I bought it when I was very young. It's the actual first mail order game system I purchased. There was also a smaller, like a module book that went with it, and I don't know where that happened to that one. So the rules are pretty basic, and advancement's almost non-existent. You develop your character, and your character is your character, and that's it. And there's not a lot of extra bells and whistles to go along into play, as opposed to game systems like Space Opera, which has a lot of similarities to Traveler. In this system, you go through a number of phases, so you choose how develop your character gets through the progress of development, and it can be pretty dangerous. In the older versions, you could actually, your character could die in the process of being created, and there's some role master that would do that too. Excuse me, that would do that too, and I always thought that as both frustrating and fun. And so in many cases, once again, Seth Skorkowski does an awesome video on how to set up your initial characters. Like I said, if I remember, I would put a tag for him below too, and for his video too. The idea basically being is once your character's developed, you're still based on skills. It's none of this leveling. You're more inclined to role play your character as opposed to roll the dice kind of mechanic based system, which is what a lot of people want. So it's like Space Opera itself is very complex. The options for your character development is very hard science kind of sci-fi-ish. And actually, it's a bit, I think they started looking at Traveler and said, how can we make it even more convoluted? And that's how Space Opera got developed. And, we're back to different game systems. Once again, the leveling systems also play a role that also can be problematic. Vampire the Masquerade, if you're familiar with the game system, it doesn't really have a level-based system. It does have some skill-based, but it kind of has this collage of both and neither. And one of the things I found that is strangely absent, they touch on it, don't get me wrong, they touch on it, but when you're dealing with vampires, age matters. Age matters because you're basically immortal. And so if you're playing a very young vampire, well, the idea that your vampire could literally be hundreds, if not thousands of years old over time isn't possible. So you would assume that somebody who's 1,000 years old is going to have a vastly deeper repertoire of experience and abilities and knowledge and levels than somebody who isn't. See, the Middle Earth role-playing game, which I did include the core book in my stack of stuff here. MERP, when you look at J.R.R. Tolkien's ideal elves are immortal. There's a reason why elves seem to be almost superhuman or super powerful, or supers, if you will. When compared to the average human in the films and the movies, because they are much older and they've had many centuries or decades or centuries or more or entire ages to hone and practice and become flawlessly good at what they do. When they sit there and we kind of make fun of some, like Legolas jumping on a shield and surfing down a damn stairwell and knocking while shooting arrows, well, that's just retarded. Maybe, but if you look at somebody who spends so much of their vast life doing what they do, they're going to become very flamboyant at it with it because it'll be secondhand, and they're doing things that would be considered impossible by average person standards. This is what makes them stand out, but the games don't allow for that. So leveling systems actually have some flaws to them. One of the biggest flaws that Dungeons and Dragons always had, when I remember growing up and stuff, was that we had to, at some point you cap. You can literally, in space of a dozen sessions, go from 0 level to 20th level, and now your characters are basically too powerful for the lion's share of the quote normal monsters and beasties in the monster manual, and you have to progress to planular stuff, going to the planes, going beyond. You're actually working at the beginning stages of deity, being a demigod, and that can be problematic. We're back to how much are we just piling on the stats, and I can do 300 points of damage with one blow, or I can deliver 42 attacks because I just keep segueing. My success just keeps segueing because I have all this stack of skill sets, or all these feats and all these things that all work together. This is a reason why by later editions of AD&D we've seen the actual skill stuff kind of shrink and become less of a component of the games themselves. If you really want to pick up first edition, second edition stuff, and really look at how important skills were compared, because they didn't have feats, and leveling in a way, is a broken system. And there's a lot of differences between the tabletop mechanics of doing things and video games. Video games provide you with a whole lot of stuff you physically don't have to keep track of yourself. You don't have to do all the grunt work and the paperwork that's involved with doing some of the things that's expected of you. So when we look at that sort of stuff, the skill-based systems, you have to, as a player, you either decide that I like this, and skills become important, more important than quote leveling, or non-existent. Leveling is just non-existent. I mean, most game systems, remember, we're not talking class as in classification of what your character is. He's classified as a Jedi. He's classified as a smuggler. Well, his skill set is going to be geared to that classification. But he's not piling on the experience to pile on more levels to become a super smuggler kind of thing. Although we now have epic rules and epic level stuff for characters who do develop. So we're back to some leveling systems exist and are moderated. Some leveling systems are flamboyant. Skill-based systems are actually predominant. Is in the larger share of game systems produced over the last 40 years are dependent more on your skill sets and what your character supposedly knows and can do, is which, if you look at it from that perspective, from the role-playing perspective, the fact that this particular character has this set of range of skills. Han Solo was a crack pilot, was very superb pilot when it comes to the Millennium Falcon, specifically because he spent 90% of his time flying the Millennium Falcon. So he was a specialist in that particular ship. Not just the YT-1300, but specifically his ship, because he knew it so well. His mechanic skills were moderately okay, as opposed to Chewbacca, who spent more time developing mechanical skills, and he tend to be a bit more mechanically inclined than Han was. So his shortcomings as a pilot, he could fly, but he wasn't as spectacular or as daring as Han Solo. He knew the Millennium Falcon intimately, probably even better than Han Solo did when it come to its mechanics and how it functioned and what its shortfalls could be and what potential failures could be occurring. But the end of the day, the pairing of the two, both having an independent skill set that companioned each other, that went together, made them a much superior duo as a set of characters. And so the same thing goes for our player characters when we're sitting down at the table. So game systems in general encourage this. Now, leveling-based systems, not necessarily so much. And what do we get by? How does D&D get around this particular kind of mindset? Well, this is where the class comes in. Well, I'm going to have a tank, and I'm going to have a magic user, and I'm going to have I'm going to have a medic, or so I'm going to have a fighter, a magic user, and a priest, and perhaps a rogue. So now I've got 4 individuals, each one with a class of skill sets and feats that complement the others, making up for what the other ones don't have. And between the 4 or 5 people, then they should be able to take on pretty much all challenges or most challenges and find some sort of method to either overcome, bypass, or get through that challenge. Right? That's just my assessment on when we're dealing with things like skill versus role or leveling. So which and they say, what does that matter? Well, it don't matter, because at the end of the day, as long as you're having fun, isn't that kind of the whole point of the game in the first place, was to have fun and enjoy yourself and to have your friends over and do what you can, do what you can't do, and get forward and get better. So what was the goal of the game session? What was the goal of the game group? This is where I ask myself, were we here to just create a story that's flawless and seamless and entertaining for other people? Are we entertaining people who are, tapping our YouTube channels to watch our sessions and deciding, well, that sounds great? Or were we there to entertain the people at the table? And at the end of the day, were the people at the table entertained? Did everybody get what they expected? If you spend $40 and all you do is buy a player manual because you're just a player, as opposed to your game master who bought $500 worth of books because they want to have a deeper understanding of how things work and mechanics, etc. They want to utilize those things on occasion too. And there sits the difference between veteran and experienced players and storytellers and novice and noobs in a lot of aspects. The older and the longer, the more jaded you are, the less you really need these things to prop up your play in the table. If there's a concession or something later that you think, well, this should have went something in a different way, you can take it, make a note, and then later after the game session, you approach the storyteller and have a discourse over whether or not the call was made or wasn't made. Perhaps something different should have been allowed. The question is, do you have the fortitude or the discipline to not bring that up at your table? Are you expecting the right and the ability to do that at your table? I mean, that comes down to individuals and the game sessions and how that stuff plays out. And at the end of the day, we are all going on about having our, fun and so on and so forth, and seeing the talking heads, talking without the visuals or without all the distraction. Or we came to the table to utilize our stuff to explore the mechanical options and or the other game options, to strategize before we act. I mean, take that in for a moment. One of the things that have always slowed down a game session that actually can break the immersion, and this is a topic, it's called immersion. Immersing yourself in the game, becoming the character that you're portraying, and staying in character as much as possible for the ROLE playing part. When you start bringing in the ROLL part that involves all the mechanics and the stacks of all the material that you've acquired or purchased or been presented, that allows you these variations of options and strategy and tactics and things like this, is not discussing them while you're in character, because doing so can break the immersion, can break the flow, can shatter not just the flow for yourself, but everybody else at the table, which is completely understandable if that's your sole narrow view of how you want the game to run and how you want the game to play. So if you insist as a game master, that's how you want your table to operate at, that's your right. Absolutely, you're right. You might find yourself having trouble getting enough players to follow that mindset, but with the social internet and virtual tabletop and stuff like that, that's actually far easier to do now than it would have been 20 years ago when you were trying to do this at a table, because it was hard enough to find people to sit down and introduce new people, because there was so many stigmatisms attached to it, and or time issues. We all, most of us struggle. In a way, I kind of look forward to my retirement, because I can return to the freedom of my youth of being able to game more and maybe get more involved in stuff and to find things. I mean, I have yet to find a virtual table that I can tap into. I don't really want to run a virtual game right now. That is a lot of work, and I just would like to game at one for just the experience of it. Tabletop wise, it's the same thing. It's probably been a year and a half since my last game session that I've actually sat down and played, and it's been 9 months since my last play by post. And I chose the play by post system in part through D&D Beyond, because it was just one of those things where you can sit down for 20 minutes in the morning or the afternoon or the evening and do what you got to do. And as long as everybody else is doing the same thing, it just keeps flowing along. It's not awesomely great. It's not too bad either. There's moments, sessions, and so on and so forth. But I admit it's been a little while since I've been, you know, deciding to go back and play it again. So when we look at, like I said, I'm a big fan of skills. I'm old school in a lot of aspects, and we hear that a lot when people toss it around. OSR, I'm old school. I'm a curmudgeon. I'm a grognard, or something like that. What do they mean by being? What do you mean by being a grognard? Well, okay. I spend so much of my time playing. I want to say at least half of my time playing this system here, level based, fast paced, and compared to most game systems, Dungeons and Dragons can be considered a fast paced game. Uh, you're developing your character at a retarded speed. If you look at age versus things, your character doesn't age maybe 6 months of actual, game time, maybe a year, and they went from being nobody, a farmer's daughter, to being an arch wizard, ruling a country or something in very short time. They're extremely powerful, and that seems to me, it's fun, it's accepted, it's understandable. It's what a lot of people expect. I personally do not think that it's everything. And so, based on skill-based games, where skills matter, that it's whether or not I can climb that tree. If my character has a sufficient strength or agility, whether I have the skill for climbing or not shouldn't matter. Climbing a tree is not that damn hard. If you're disabled or you're damaged or you're over encumbered, or somebody's trying to pull you back down while you're trying to climb there, now that's a little different. But if I come back and I say I want to climb the side of that skyscraper to get to the 12th floor because I want to, whatever I'm trying to do, that should be a skill climb check. You should have that check. You should not have taken that option away from the player and the game master by consolidating that into an agility check or something. And as a game perspective, so the roll, ROLL, versus the ROLE play version of the game, is that you should already have a good idea that your character has got enough skill and stat bonuses in that challenge, whether or not it's necessity to make an actual physical roll to give you that chance. So if you have better than 80% success rate of climbing a damn building, to say the second floor, then by all means, the character should not have to break character. The player should not have to break the character's immersion to climb that wall. It should just be a thing. And if there's a challenge that pops up, then at that point, perhaps a dice roll is requested, and you make the roll, and it either succeeds or not. So how you do that and still maintain a character base is talent. experience and damn near impossible for most people. Just my opinion on that subject. And so when we talk about skills and stuff, part of the fun of developing things is, you know, understanding the mechanics of how so many of these game systems work. And this is just a selection of the crap that's sitting on my damn bookcases out there, and piled up over here, and piled up down here, and piled up over here, and stacked up out there by the floor. And I got one in my work truck right now, because I've been one of my BattleTech videos or books I've been reading through, because I'm trying to get caught up on the 3150 age of things, you know. And I'm fixing to do, you know, another video here when I'm done rambling with this here on the Wolf Clan, because I got to do something. You know, last weekend was pretty rough, and didn't do any videos last weekend, and so I try to do 3 or 4 videos when I do sit down, and it takes 3 or 4 hours sometimes. I mean, I don't sit here staring at a clock, because, you know, I don't really want to do that. And I had to work Friday night, etc., etc. We're back to that. You know, the world sucks, and sometimes you got to do what you got to do. And, you know, if you can't write, you teach about writing, right? And that's an adage I learned from college. And think about that for a minute. How many literary teachers in school have never actually published a book themselves? I have written millions of lines. I ain't joshing. I got a video to prove it. I've got stacks of would-be novels, you know, and I did them the old school way, the old-fashioned way, and now I'm struggling with finding the time to translate it over into a digital format just to get it out there. And I keep poking away at it. It's like everything else, we keep poking away at. It's like this, you know, I spent so much time, so many years, you know, doing this. I get to right, and I mean, I have no idea how many tens of thousands, hundreds of hours that went into developing this particular game system. And this is just 1 of 3 books, right? But I wouldn't have been able to do any of this stuff had I not had a working knowledge of how mechanics work and skill-based systems, etc., etc. So, you know, what do you do? Where do you play? What's your choice? What's your poison? Anyway, this is Rick, and hey, it's a great Sunday out there right now. It's in the 70s here in Iowa. The sun is shining. I got all my yard work done yesterday, although I still got some partial trees down here in the backyard that are screaming to be cut up that I haven't got around to doing just yet. Technically speaking, I have a job scheduled for this evening. It's a local grocery store. Well, it's a grocery store in a town about an hour south of Des Moines, and I don't know if I want to go work it today. I got to work tomorrow evening anyway, and I'm wondering if maybe I should just stay home tonight and go do that job tomorrow. Be an all-day job. That's how my work schedule works out sometimes. I work 4 damn days and work freaking 50 hours in those 4 days, it feels like some days. And then other days I work 6 days and I work 40 hours in 6 days. It just kind of, you know, takes its toll on you. Anyway, tell Rick. Going on, my friends, this is Rick, and hey, if you like the channel, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, tell your buddies, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, tell anybody else that's in the gaming industry or gaming fandom that says, hey, this is a channel worth checking out, right? Till next time, I hope you guys have yourself